So
Please.
Jordan, I really appreciate you making the time because, like, I think the questions you're asking about facilitation are real questions, and I think, and I hope we can get to. So I have like a whole bunch of like my own thoughts around visual facilitation, but I think maybe we can take a step back and you can put me in your challenge space and like talk about like
Okay.
what you sort of saw the reason you wanted to think about this particular
Sure.
problem and what the problem is.
So since I last saw you last October, excuse me, I've had the opportunity to facilitate 2 or 3 workshops in the last few months, which is a lot for me. It's more than what I usually get to do. And I realized after the 3rd one that there was something lacking from my approach, and it wasn't the content, it wasn't the exercises. I mean, there's always things to change on those fronts, but I found that whatever I delivered at the end, if I was doing this on behalf of my company, was just sort of a set of notes. And most of the exercises that I had people do, I had people writing things down on sticky notes and moving them around boards and writing categories up on the wall and occasionally drawing roadmaps or drawing sort of ugly grids and tables. And I thought back to our workshop, and I even had in my notes from that weekend was, use visuals. But that was sort of the end of it. It was that note. Then I looked at it and I thought, I would like to use visuals. I have no idea how to do that. I don't even know what a good visual during this process would even look like.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of got stuck.
Yeah, and I think the more you get the people in the workshop to use visuals, I think the more, maybe the less you're going to have to do sort of with words afterwards. I don't know if you're ever going to be the point where you can literally just like take a picture of all the walls and say, here, client, this is what we did. Like that's
the dream.
That's the dream. Yeah. The automatic workshop. But I think getting yourself into the habit of using visuals more, and then also getting your participants to like tune up their visuals are all valuable things. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yes, that's what I'm here for.
It does, and I could tell that it would be something, or at least my hope rather is that it would be something that would not only sort of elicit different responses from people, but it's also something that would kind of switch up the temperature in the room, if that phrase makes sense.
It does.
I found almost all of my activities at a very similar temperature, or to pull from my background, they all had the same stage picture. It's a group of people writing words, writing sentences.
Yeah. And so temperature is such an interesting concept. So what would you describe that temperature as? Like, is that is it lukewarm? Is it warm? Is it hot? Is it cold?
We got the more sticky notes were in play, and the more people began to sort of map things instead of just clustering them, the higher the temperature got and the more activated the room got. But it definitely two workshops in a row. I did one on a Sunday and then one on a Tuesday, the following Tuesday, which for me was a lot back to back. And I found they both kind of topped out at a similar energy level in the room, and we never quite broke through.
That's really
not
cool.
That visuals are inherently high energy, but it's sort of there was a pretty small dynamic range, or small temperature range between exercises.
And if we're gonna like Marshall McLuhan this. Right, the medium is the message, and I think visuals with words activate more parts of the brain. I was just reading something about this, about how like the brain can only process like 7 bits of information at one go, and with pictures, I think the bits are denser somehow. There's more information that's being transmitted at once.
I forget who said it, but picture does tell 1,000. Picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yeah, it is, and I think a diagram is worth 1,000 pictures.
Absolutely, and that's a point. I didn't say this, but I'm now realizing that is sort of one of the things that I got stuck on, particularly in the second workshop, was looking for other ways to articulate a set of information.
Yeah,
I found I was writing too many words on the whiteboard.
Right, and so. Again, this is something I was talking about with somebody yesterday. The more you get them to do, the more they're going to be having a lean forward conversation, which is like this. That's why the mapping is hotter. The mapping is hotter because they're doing more, right? When it's a lean back conversation, they're like, oh, so what's Jordan going to do now? What's he saying to us, right?
Yeah.
Versus like what we are doing together. So this is like the IKEA effect type of thing. So I'm going to start at the beginning. Because I think it really does come down to who, where, why, what, when, and how. Those are the things you can draw. And I didn't, this is universal. If you read Dan Rome's Back of the Napkin, he goes way, way, way deep into the different ways of drawing these. And if you like thumb through the book after this session, you'll be like, oh, Daniel stole half of this stuff from Dan Rome. And he like stole like a quarter from Matthias, because I've taken Matthias's Thinking Clearly workshop, which we did little bits of in the 2-day masterclass. But here's the thing, and I think this is actually one of your biggest challenges, is legible handwriting and fonts. So like I hope you have a Sharpie and some paper nearby.
This is an example of my default handwriting.
Yeah. So
look, that's supposed to be the word dog in parentheses.
That's
pathetic.
Yeah, so here's two things. First of all, no, hold that up again. That's amazing. So because people are going to be listening to this on the podcast, it's really funny that you put dog and sticky notes in parentheses, like you're apologizing for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like,
I didn't think my picture of a dog was very compelling.
But like,
5-year-old draws a dog.
But here's the thing: if you just draw a dog and then just write dog underneath it, there's no apology necessary. You're just labeling it. Here's the thing: like, grab a piece of paper, and I literally just want you to write in caps. And there's another resource. I'm gonna get his name wrong, but I think it's Mike Road. Literally wrote the book on sketchnoting. And sketchnoting is one of the most powerful ways to be visual without being able to quote unquote draw. Okay. So I'm going to look that up. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to write who, what, where, when, how, and why. And I want you to write them all in caps.
Okay.
And I want you to try some different fonts. I've got a couple that I like, wide, narrow. I do little thick lines. I do double lines. I change up my size. But just write down who, what, when, where, how, and why, and just write in caps.
All right.
I know this is boring for whoever has to listen to this. Like,
sorry,
listening to you.
Right. First, I never knew that there were multiple fonts that you could handwrite in, although it seems obvious now.
Yeah, and so Mike Rhodes' book, the Sketchnote Handbook, is really, really awesome for, like, I sometimes thumb through it just to be like, okay, wait, what are some other fonts that I know? Wide, narrow. I think I stole the sort of like, making the descender, or the left arm of the H and E and the R's like wider with like 2 or 3 strokes is a really fun way of making stuff really, really hotter looking. And literally writing in caps means that you slow yourself down a little bit, and what you write can be read by other people. Do you want to show me that?
Well, yeah, I was just debating if it can be read by other people.
Oh yeah, look at that. That's great. So no, this is awesome. And so one thing that you want to think about is speed, and then verticality with letters. So like making sure that your H's and your E's and your N's are all like up and down. And then just think about when you're in front of a room, you can totally put it down. When you're writing in a room, I assume you're using whiteboard markers.
Whiteboard markers, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And I have developed preferences on brands. The Expos are great. They're fine. When I am in a room and they have the Mr. Sketch markers, sometimes, which are great. I love Mr. Sketch, but you can only use them on paper. but they have some whiteboard markers that aren't chisel tip. They have ones that are sort of like pointed, and they are horrible because you don't have that wide side to sort of get a long stroke on, and they're too fast, if that makes any sense. Like,
it does. I was using one the other day trying to draw a simple grid, and you know, in the best of circumstances, my grids were already a little wobbly, and this one, by the time I got to the bottom, it was moving so quickly. I was way off from where I started.
Yeah, and so that's like one thing I've learned is look where your hand is going, not where your hand is. So if you're drawing a long line, you know, go to where you're going. So if we're just talking about like the basics of visuality in visualness in a room, like straight lines and curves that are not like wussy are important. And so literally this is stuff that we did in design school. It's like just practicing drawing ovals. And there's something about an oval that just is not just like a little wimp, where you're just like, here, it's an oval. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it just doesn't like come off as like, just like it, you know, like kids who are just like begging to get beat up in junior high school. It's like, dude, like just try, tuck in your shirt. And that's what it is. So this is actually an exercise of Matthias's. I mean, we don't have to do this right now because I think it's going to take too much of your brain, but he talks about drawing your life using fonts and hierarchy only.
Hierarchy.
Yeah, so I don't know if you see this, like some of this is big, some of this is small, and so this is a really, really fundamental idea of just white space. So I'm just going to show you the one that I did with him. It's really hard to like look at this on the screen while I'm doing this, but you can see like I have, it's just pictures, like so I have life and work and design and like little words, and I use some crazy fonts here. And it's a really interesting practice to just think about like just using type and size and hierarchy. What can I communicate with people? And to that, I'm going to add this idea of just some visual basics that we just talked about. I don't know if you even noticed the difference between this one, the who, what, when, where, how, and why, where there's no border. I think there's something about a border. Matthias is a big fan of this. My friend Robert Mulhall, who I'm actually talking to right after this, he is one of the first facilitators I ever saw draw a border around every single white, big sticky chart paper he put up. And it blew my mind. I'm like, why do you do that each time? He's like, well, what do you think it does? I'm like, it completes it. You know, it just completes it. And so
encapsulating something now.
It encapsulates it. And so, putting a little title on everything. First of all, you can't use the top of one of these sticky chart papers anyway. And so just little things that I do that aren't pictures are like shadowing, flagging, borders,
I have
icons.
Since the workshop I took with you, I have started drawing boxes around things just in my own personal notes during a meeting.
Yeah.
I've tried to switch to more handwritten notes for practice.
That's good. So I'm going to ask also, do you use, like, the other thing is like color, like alternating colors like this? Just, if you're writing words and there's more than 4 lines of text and they're separate ideas, just pick two colors that are, not the same, but not too different. Like, I don't like using red and green because it's just too Christmassy. But, they're like, but with the black and the blue, if you're, are you capturing a list of things? Are you organizing information that for people?
Quite often.
Summarizing things? Just put 2 pens or 3, get a blue, a black, and a red, and just keep them in your paw the whole time. And it's just gonna make it easier for you to create highlights and alternating colors.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. So those are like,
I like this.
That's table stakes. I don't know if you're familiar with the visual alphabet. So Dave Gray and Suni Brown both have a visual alphabet. If you Google visual alphabet, you will find lots of these. I have my own. There's another book called Ed Emberley. Wait, how old is your little one? You have 2 little ones.
She's 5.
She's 5.
Oh,
Okay,
just one.
Perfect. There's a book called by Ed Emberley called Draw a World. Does she like to draw?
She loves to draw.
Okay, so you should draw with your daughter. there's a book called Draw World. He's got a completely different visual alphabet from Dave Gray and Sunny Brown. And he does things like, okay, here's how to draw a frog. Draw a box, draw these squiggles, make it this, and now we're going to draw an alligator using the exact same point line, triangle, house cloud, loop, whatever.
Cool.
It is super fun. It's super fun. Just first of all, it's just super fun. But it also will start to help you think about what you need to draw. So these are the things that I tend to draw a lot. I have icons on almost anything. That if I'm drawing 3 key points, I'll just draw a little wrench or a computer or my little Weebles. There's 12 different Weeble types. Anytime there's a goal, I draw a little goal thing. If we're thinking about something, and notice that's just a cloud with some dots. But it's if you write what are we thinking about, and you put it in clouds with little dots underneath it, people are it's one of these things that's so dumb, and people think it's so charming.
Yes,
and it'll get
really
people in, and it changes the experience people are going to have in the room.
Yeah,
and it's going to make them more willing to do it themselves, I think. So I'm just going to pause for a second because I just threw a bunch of stuff at you. There's yet more, but I just want to where do you think these tools do you think they're within your grasp? How can you?
I would say I'm so bad that even these icons, I would need to practice quite a bit.
That's
but
good.
I'm willing to put in some practice time.
That is good. And use Google image search or the Noun Project or whatever. Think about go through some pictures from your past workshops and think how could an icon make that better? What's an icon for that? And so I've over time just developed, I'm just looking. I tend to write a lot of invitations these days because I'm really obsessed with the idea of how do we invite people into a thing. I draw a lot of people and groups of people and eyeballs. Lots of eyeballs. Draw a lot of eyeballs. Clocks. Books. We're gonna. I think you can iconize anything. And even if it doesn't fit perfectly, wrenches go with everything.
I was going to say, I don't think I've ever drawn an icon. But whenever I see even a white paper or a presentation where there's consistent use of small iconography,
yes,
it just gives the whole thing a level of polish that wasn't there before.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Your icons don't have to be fantastic. There's a company called Bicablau, which is really hard to Google because it's hard to spell because it's a German visual design education company. They're a company that literally just specializes in making people masters of this stuff that I'm talking about. And they have a book, literally a book of icons for this sort of facilitation work, group of people talking, group of people going someplace together, group of people this. Oh God, it's crazy. I think with 5 or 6 things, people will think you're good at it. No, I'm serious because people think I'm good at it and I'm just average at it. A voice bubble that that works well for you. I'm there's a reason why I love my little flag banner. A flag banner just is charming AF. It's just super.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
it makes people feel good.
Yes. It does. It does.
It really does. I mean, you look at just words for an hour, and your eyes start to glaze over.
Yes. So I want to go into the who, the where, the when, the how. Who drawings, at least 2 who drawings that are worthwhile is stakeholder maps and empathy diagrams or empathy maps, both of which you've maybe seen before. The empathy diagram that's here is
that one's
classic Dave Gray. Stakeholder mapping. I do this a lot with Luma. Luma's really big on stakeholder mapping, mapping the ecosystem of people. And notice that each person is a mini persona. Each person is a little Weeble with a voice bubble, which has groups and connections. And so for me, if I'm getting people to try and take a step back and think about a problem, it's okay, well, let's think about all the different people. And so I will get people to draw the people so that I don't have to draw the people.
I like that.
Yeah, I'm doing less. But I think here's one that I think is really going to help you, though, which is where. And this is just dividing up the room really clearly into segments of your work. So if you're using my favorite open, explore, and close for your 2-hour ideation session, and it's like open is like the people and the challenges and the problems and the goals, and the explore is all the different ideas and all the connections we make, and then we move over to the close with the decisions and the choices that we're going to decide. Literally dividing up the room and labeling them. If you've got an agenda,
always
make the wall your agenda.
Oh, that's interesting.
So if it's a 3-part agenda, have 3 chunks labeled with that agenda, and have a visual artifact from each one of those, because then you're leaving a breadcrumb trail for yourself. So when you get to the close, you can say, hey, remember in the open, this is what we agreed on.
Yeah, you can actually walk back over to it.
Yeah. So that I think is one of the most powerful things you can do, is make the space your notebook. By the way, I'm totally going to give you the audio and the video from this. So, but of course, notes. But notes later.
I want to write down the things that really get me.
No, and I appreciate that.
Sorry for the typing pause.
No, it's totally fine. I'm wondering, what's the barrier? Is there any barrier to doing this?
So to using the space, it's I'm often limited because it's not my space.
Yes.
So if there's, if it's a small conference room with one small whiteboard, I won't usually have that luxury. But I'm thinking even just having people, I was helping out at a workshop just the other day, and I almost had everyone switch seats halfway through just to switch up their thinking.
Yes. I'm a big fan.
I was like 40% in charge, so I never quite got to jump in and make everybody do it. But I think there's more that I'm realizing. There's more than one way to use the space.
Yeah.
So I think I should have pushed with that idea.
Well, so this is not directly related to visual thinking, but I just want to take a moment and say, if you ignore your intuition, it will eventually just decide to go someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like as a facilitator, sometimes when you feel something in the room, it's because it's there, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're like, oh God, I'm tired, it's like, if it's boring you, it's boring them, right? and if there's that tickle where you're like, oh, we should totally switch things up. Would you have gotten in? You're partially not in charge, which is always a problem, but
would not have gotten in trouble. Probably would have been perfectly fine. Might have raised one eyebrow, but yeah. I just held back out of just out of fear.
So with one of those things, I always think about the invitation, which is how can I frame this in a way that makes it seem totally natural, inviting. You're like, hey, I was wondering. I was thinking it might be fun if we blanked. Would that be cool with you? Or hey, blank. What do you think about that? Or hey, you might have been noticing this too.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking whatever. Finding a way to just give yourself permission. But yeah, getting people to move around, that's a really powerful. That's actually one of the reasons why I find that teams just run into they start to fill the inner corner more and more densely. They start inserting the Explorer up in the upper left, and then they work their way down to the lower right, and there's more and more sticky notes down there. And I'm like, okay, here's a new piece of paper. Now take 2 things off of. I don't know if you remember that during the color ideation exercise that we did.
Oh yeah.
I literally said, okay, why don't you everyone just take 2 ideas and just stick it on this new piece of paper, and lo and behold, those are just the ideas that everyone moved forward with, because we just they just put it on that new space, and then they just rotated away from the old space, and then they just were off to the races. And so to me, where and what, just fusing them and making the room your space is really, really important.
I like that. Yeah, there's a power to having to go back and grab that sticky note again and actually physically do something else with it. It's this idea has not put this idea to bed yet.
And the stuff we're leaving behind is still there, right? it's not gone. And so people can still see it, so it makes them feel safe. but they've just done this natural thing, and they've moved to this new area, and so now there's just less information, and now they're focused on that. So I think there's something really, really powerful about using whatever your agenda is, whatever your design process is. There's a certain, like, one of the things I've been doing a lot of thinking about is the logic of the problem. So like, what is that? I have this model that I tend to use. This is a bad version of it, but like, that is way too much information to show on the video. But yeah, so this is like, if a person can achieve a goal with a feature, then we can have a business outcome, but it could fail, so we should do some sort of an experiment. And these are each like tools that help us identify that person, tools that help us think about the goal, tools that help us think about features, tools that help us think about business outcomes, and tools to help us think about testing and mitigating failure.
Is there a milkshake? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, there is.
On the goals, bro?
That is the jobs to be done milkshake.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yes, the McDonald's milkshake.
The McDonald's milkshake that like takes up your whole commute, therefore they drink it on their commute. And so for me, I feel like there's a better one in here somewhere. Like there's an actual printed version. I may have left it downstairs. I'll send you a copy because I think you might read it.
Thank you.
For me, that logic of the user hypothesis, if a user can achieve a goal with a feature of the system, then we'll achieve money, right? Like, if that's the user experience question that a group of people are coming together to decide, dedicate an area in the room to each one of those. Put a label on it that's bigger, right? You know, use your big font skills, and then draw a border around it, and then people are in the problem space. That is really, really powerful. And then you're just building this narrative structure together of like, oh, well, which people? Oh, well, there's lots of people. All that stuff. Because a lot of the things you're doing is around technology challenges, right? Yeah,
technology challenges, exactly. What features are you trying to build, or why do you think they're going to solve a problem, or what are the problems you're trying to solve? And I do a lot of I'm realizing now, I do a lot of future state exercises, and it would be fun to divide the room into sort of present and future.
Yeah,
so that
totally.
All our future thinking happens over here, and our current state and obstacles happen over on this other side. Just doing that, I think, would make a big difference in terms of temperature of the room.
And you also can then have this tension because you can say like, well, this is where we are now. How do we get over there? Because this is where we are now. How do we? And people go like, oh yeah, they want to go over there, but we're held back by what we're doing. So you draw like, do you get your people to draw like journey maps at all?
I haven't yet, but we've started doing them at our office. But it's something I'm interested in doing more of.
So one of the things that's really helpful about the journey map is that it's about when. Right. I was just on the next episode of the podcast. I was interviewing Jim Kalbach, who wrote a book on mapping experiences, and he was telling me this story about how he was invited to do this mapping workshop for this nonprofit about how to understand the experiences of former radical extremists.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right? And so they did a mapping workshop with like former like American gangbangers and like Al Qaeda members and like and here are these people who have come out of that world and are now helping others. And so Jim was doing the thing we do, which is like, I want to understand the whole user experience from, discovery and research to like usage and referral, right? And what they were interested in was not how do people get recruited and get radicalized. They weren't interested in how people get de-radicalized. They were actually interested in how people come back and try to get people out. Because their nonprofit is like, how can we find former radical extremists to become advocates, because that is the riskiest thing to do. It's hard enough to like leave your whole family and your whole network. It's much more dangerous to come back and say, hey kid, like, have you thought about like whatever? Like that can get you hurt. And having that whole user journey allows you to focus on one part. And so that's like, I think that's one of the powers of diagramming that user experience. Jim, I mean, when the episode drops, you should definitely listen to Jim's talk about it, because he's like, I come in with some of this done and then they fill it in, versus like, can we build this together? Can we get people to draw this? I think if you can get people to draw what they think is happening with the customer, are they happy and sad at what phase? Then you have this question of like, why is this happening? Like if the customer experience is getting shitty here and better here, why is it happening? Right. So that's why I think drawing how much pain and emotion and when and why. Like this is like drawing what, when, and why all in one diagram, which is really, it's like this is a warm medium. Right? There's a lot in there.
Do you ever get resistance from people who are attending your workshops in terms of, oh, you're asking me to draw?
No, but that's because I disrupt power. Well, generally when I'm there, I'm being paid to do it, and so that's where you have to think about it as an invitation. And also, are they well primed? So that's where, like, can they just draw the user experience? Probably not. Like, if you get 3 people to just interview each other about, it's like, hey Jordan, like, what do you think some of the, like, what are we doing well? Like, what's not working well? Like, what have we been trying to shift with the customer experience? And you're like, well, this and this. And somebody else says, oh, this and this. Then they could potentially draw what they think is an ideal customer experience or the current customer experience, because you've primed them, right? They've become primed, and so that they can do it. But if you just said like, hey, draw the customer experience, they probably can't. And I think that's what you were talking about with like from the warm to the hot. Like you could get them to write down 5 things that you think are great about the customer experience and 5 things that they think are not great about the customer experience. And then say, okay, map what you think is the current customer experience from like most painful to least painful, beginning, middle, and end. Now they've got all the information, but now they're turning it into they have all the data and then they're turning it into information. So I'd say like, there's all these data points and you're like, okay, make it into a thing. And this is one of Matthias's exercises, which is like draw your whole life from beginning to end, which was fun. This is my life. I was angry when I was a kid. I'm not sure why, but
oh wow.
And
looks like you bounced back.
I did bounce back. I'd like to think of myself. Well, I try to like try to be positive about things, but this is something to practice on your own, which is just like sitting and drawing your own experience diagram. So I'm gonna give you a drawing assignment right now, and you can pick like any or all of these, which is to draw yogurt. And so there's at least 5 ways here. So you can draw the people involved with yogurt. You can draw how to make yogurt. When in a day or a week do you consume yogurt? The history of yogurt. You could also draw a concept map. You could draw the yogurt market. I'm going to see if I can. I have some yogurt drawings, which I will share with you when you are. I'm going to give you like 2 minutes to draw. Are you a yogurt lover? Do you eat, consume
I'm a yogurt. I tolerate yogurt.
Okay.
I used to eat a lot more of it, and I think I kind of OD'd on yogurt for a while.
Oh, great! So you could actually draw the experience, Jordan's experience of yogurt over time. You could draw like what happened when you OD'd on it, and then like now you're in this trough of yogurt disillusionment. trough of yogurt disillusionment.
Trough of yogurt.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
It's a good band name.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's taken. I think all the four-word band names have been taken, generally.
All right. I think I've got something here.
This is awesome. You're so good, Jordan.
I'm trying. I'm just like improv. I'm just trying to turn off the judgmental part of my brain so I can draw something.
Yes, and
See whatever comes out. All right.
Okay. Show me what you've got.
This is my yogurt journey.
Love it.
So 3 o'clock on a standard day, I go to the fridge, get myself a yogurt. I've got my big spoon. Happy. I'm ready to go. Over time, the yogurt container starts to seem a little bit larger and the spoon starts to seem a little bit smaller. And I wonder, am I going to get to the end of this damn thing? And by the end, it's just this giant, overbearing yogurt container filled to the brim. No matter how many bites I take, I get no closer to the bottom until, I forgot to draw my end state.
That's amazing.
Until, and then, all right. Until we get to end state, which is me eating a pretzel.
Yeah, just giving up on it. That's a really good pretzel, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. I think you could definitely benefit from straight line practice, by the way.
Yes.
Just some straight line practice. I want you to now draw a concept map of the yogurt market. I want you to draw like a concept map of the yogurt market. Like, I want you to make a diagram, a concept map of what's going on in the yogurt market.
All right.
The dog is stirring.
She's been asleep all day. She's chosen this as her moment. Let's see.
We'll give you 1 more minute.
All right.
To sketch yogurt.
I'm cheating. I'm writing words.
No, words and pictures are fine. That's a diagram. All right. Show me what you got.
I didn't get terribly far. I started with families.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Kids. My daughter still loves yogurt.
Yes.
And then when I got to adults, they both came out very sad because of my personal yogurt feelings. So these are sad single people, and I'm not single, but I feel like yogurt. That's what it evokes to me. If you don't have it in the house, I feel like it's a single person snack.
Yes.
And they're not happy about it.
So you're like, what you've drawn is like you've started to draw like a stakeholder map, where you're like, here are the types of consumers of yogurt, families and adults. I'm gonna show you one of my drawings. I'm a big fan of this one. Let's see if I can fit that in there. Ooh. This is yogurt. This is yogurt flavor by location. Sometimes the flavor, like the fruits on the top. Have you seen Noosa? Noosa's like, it's like the flavor's sort of like thrown in. Some of it goes to the bottom, some of it goes to the top. It breaks this diagram. And then sometimes you have flavor at the bottom. And then flavor all mixed in. I think there's 3 types of yogurt.
Yes.
They can either put it at the top, put it on the bottom, or mix it all throughout.
Yeah.
It's my logical drawing of yogurt.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense.
This was my drawing of like the yogurt landscape. I know, I kind of went crazy. I was actually talking to a friend of mine at Chobani about helping them with the strategic project. So I was like highly attuned to yogurt.
The yogurt
So
on the
there's
brain.
like
I see. I didn't even get into Greek and.
Yeah, like Greek is sort of like growing and taking over this idea of natural kefir, gogurt, drinkable yogurt. I mean, you can't drink Greek yogurt. And so getting people to draw like this is sometimes like a leap, but there's an exercise called How to Draw Toast or How to Make Toast, which you should Google. He's got a TED Talk. And if I find that if I ask people like, draw your job or draw our biggest challenge or draw your coat of arms, like if I ask them in the right way, they will do it. And this is great because if you have clients in the room, you want everybody's mental picture of what's happening.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's why getting everyone to draw yogurt, if you're working on yogurt, is useful because you can put this up and say, okay, what's everybody thinking? Like, what's your picture of yogurt? Yes, it's slightly weird, but I think with the right prompts, people, can do it. And, drawing things like e-commerce or abstract concepts, like practice, think of like a couple of ways to draw e-commerce and then ask yourself, like, if I asked people to draw our customer experience challenge, could they do it? If I asked them to draw our business model, could they do it? Right? Diagramming your business model means that you actually understand where you create value and how to change it. So I'm a big fan of asking a group of people like, hey, draw your blank.
This is going to come in very handy because I was just right before this call, somebody asked me from work, hey, could you help us facilitate a road mapping session to basically revamp our design department internally? So it's going to be all designers at the table, all visual thinkers, and me.
Wow. Well, so
how would you come to them in their language? That's going to go a long way.
How would you draw a roadmap?
So here, I'll show you. I'll show you what I usually come up with. Grab a sheet of paper. I don't even know if I'd call it drawing, but so usually I go with the grid. I've got swim lanes, months at the top, and then we populate these with stickies. So it is a vaguely visual way to hold the information, but it doesn't feel as visual to me as it could.
Yeah, I was thinking about sketching this for you, and I'm just sketching it for you now. This is like a really, really bad version of the Drexler Civet.
Oh.
Like, this is a classic diagram of like, here's our big goal, here's our secondary goal, here's our North Star, here are the steps along the way. This is a more emotional and evocative sort of, it's a grid and a bullseye diagram, but it's just put in a way that's a little bit more emotional.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a spreadsheet like mine does.
It does not. And so and so like Dave Gray also has a classic one where you draw the tree, and a tree has roots. And so you can put the problems at the roots, and then you can put the fruit and that's the goal. That's what we get if we do it right. So using a metaphorical visual diagram can be really, really powerful. For sure. And so I think finding that, you don't have to find a metaphor, right? You can just use, this is fine. And then this is actually one of the two last things I want to show you. This is like 4 ways of describing a visual decision. And like, obviously a circle makes something in and makes something out, right? Like, so that's like the easiest. So like, okay, let's put everything in this circle, but that's then a concentric circle helps you say like, okay, here's what we really want to do. Here's what the other things we want to do. First, second, third, or body heart, soul. I use body, heart, soul a lot with product bullseye diagrams. I make the middle of that small circle 9 sticky notes large, and people can only put 9 things as the soul of the product. Ooh. And they get to fight over the soul of the product, which is what we're doing anyway, right? We're fighting. get small groups of people to generate features and say, what's the soul? What's the body? What's the heart? Overlap. Here's one way to organize the product. Here's another way to organize the product. Are we going to do synthesis, feature sorting, bang versus buck, or impact versus cost, or complexity versus impact for the user? Getting people to make a diagram like that in small groups means that they are making a map of their decision. They're not just doing affinity clustering. Like the importance difficulty matrix, this is stuff that's really important. This stuff that's really difficult. Like, are we going for the stuff that's like the moonshots, or are we going stuff for that's the quick wins? Are we going stuff that's high ROI? Like, then you have a lot to talk about there. So to me, like these are ways of getting people to like look at and make a decision, because you're like, oh, here's all these clusters we made. This one causes that. This one inhibits this. Which one do we want to focus on? Like, what's the biggest impact? Visualize the voting on top of that. And so to me, like this stuff can be, you can do this at the beginning, the middle, or the end of a conversation, but it helps you organize your thoughts in a visual way. And then finally, I'm such a fan of getting people to fold a piece of paper and at least 4 boxes and say, who's this idea for? What's it all about? Like, how does it work, or how much does it cost, and when can we do it? Like, just getting if everyone's coming up with a bunch of ideas, just get them to break. You do this. You break the idea apart into like 4 sections, and then everyone writes stuff down in the same sections, which means you can put it up on the wall, and it just makes it easier to look at and to like unpack later.
Yeah.
That's like, that's everything I know about visual thinking and facilitation.
That was amazing. You got it in under an hour.
Yeah, but like, what's the temperature of your brain right now?
Temperature of my brain is starting to overheat. I had a nice ascent for a while, and then I hit a point about halfway through of, oh man, maybe I can actually do this. And then I had a big boil over of, oh wow, I want to do 100 of these things, and I can barely draw a straight line.
Well, so this is exactly where we need to be. What is one thing that you think you can try to insert? Or better yet, draw a little diagram for yourself of like, here are the 3 things that I want to bring in. Like, that's then you can tape it up on a wall that no one else can see and just look at it. That can be your cheat sheet.
I like that. I gotta ponder them for a minute. But I think, actually, you know what? I'm going to take a second, if you don't mind, and draw
I don't mind. I don't mind at all.
Right.
Your camera just focused differently. That was weird.
Oh yeah, it has an autofocus feature, and so if I lean down, out of frame too far, it'll focus on the dog licking herself on the couch. Sometimes it goes right past me even when I'm sitting here. It's hard to get its attention again.
Ooh,
All right.
ooh, it's a tree.
So this is a tree, more or less.
Yes.
I'm gonna practice that, but I love this idea, particularly for my group of designers coming up, of having them think about what the roots of their problem are and then work their way up to the fruit. Plus, it gets them moving around and using
Yep.
the space, which is another thing I definitely think I can start doing. Even in a small space, I'm sure there's ways to use the space if I look at the
Yeah.
room just from a
100%.
slightly different angle.
Even if you just use like 3 of these pieces of paper, like
Yeah, exactly. And then body, heart, and soul, I think is something I could work in. I like the idea of limiting that soul
Yep.
circle, and
Yep.
then you kind of work your way out towards. It's just another. I do prioritization exercises all the time,
Yes.
but this feels very different than even dot voting or just show of hands or putting stickies in order.
Yep. There's something about the soul, the body, heart, soul. I stole from this guy named Mike Krasinski. He gave a talk at the IDXA years ago, and he felt like priority 1, 2, and 3 meant that it was very easy to switch something from priority 2 to 3
Right.
if we ran out of time. But if we've agreed on what the soul of the product is, the soul is inviolable, right? And we should like agree on what the soul is. I've sometimes taken that diagram and divided it in half. So I do an exercise where people think about like the ultimate taco delivery app, and people come up with features, and sometimes they come up with app features, and sometimes they come up with taco features. It's like delicious tacos. I'm like, first of all, that's table stakes. You have to. That doesn't even belong in the diagram.
What if we deep fried it?
Yeah. And so like app features versus taco features, user features versus business features, like you can sometimes think about like dividing that up a little bit. I also just want to show you, like, this is a diagram, this is a storyboard of, I'm going to turn it sideways, not that it'll make it easier to read, but I'll just show you the first half and then the second half. This is a diagram of like my UX boot camp that I do at General Assembly from time to time. And it contains like all the drawings that I intend to make and little icons and things that I think about the people. And I would just encourage you to think about storyboarding out your next engagement. Yeah, your next workshop, and just think about, if you draw that, like if you practice drawing that tree tiny, with a felt tip pen on a piece of paper, drawing it big with a big chart paper marker is going to be easy. Sharpie on a half sheet is like using a really big marker on one of these big guys. Using like a felt tip pen on one of these is actually like it's like the same width as a whiteboard erase marker on one of these large pieces of paper, like in terms of like relative pen size.
I can tell you've held a lot of markers and pens over the years.
I have. I've thought about this a lot. And so sketching, well, because I mean, like sketching in Sharpie on a piece of paper is great, like, but it's very different. You can fit less information. That's one of the reasons why Matthias likes really big pieces of paper and Sharpies, because it's like, it's thick and slow, but it's also like a certain amount of information. Like, I mean, do you let people draw with pen on their Sharpies, on their sticky notes?
I try to use markers because pen is just illegible. I finally learned that lesson. That pen was just illegible from more than a few feet away. Have you ever used magnetic sticky notes?
The Tesla amazing ones?
Yeah.
I have. I find them not everything I want them to be. Have you, or do you like, I mean,
I've only used them once. I was very impressed for the first time out of the gate, and I wanted to use them again. I got a set of big ones for a essentially like a homepage layout UX session of let's draw components on these stickies and let's let people actually move them around the page. We haven't done it yet, but
that is really powerful, and the whiteboard ability of them is also pretty cool. Like, that the flip side, you can do whiteboard and then like erase it off, is actually like pretty amazing. I also think like bringing in like one other sticky note size can be really powerful. So if you got 3x3s, like having 3x5s or the 6x8s, these guys here like can be like a really powerful size. These are really, really great. They're super sticky as well. So just like, setting yourself up for success. But I think sketching your sessions and thinking about what the mental models and the space, that drawing that you held up, like using a bullseye diagram, using some sort of metaphor like a tree, and then thinking about dividing up the space, I think is like really, really powerful.
I mean, even just drawing these three things, I feel like I have 3 agenda items now that I didn't before.
Yeah.
This workshop was just sort of a vague jumble of words in my head, and now I can actually picture people in the room doing something, so that's a big leap.
That's amazing. Well,
I
really want to hear from you soon about how these worked out in practice.
I will let you know. And thank you so much for taking the time to share all of this with me.
It's my pleasure.
Fantastic.
This is fun.
I'm excited to start putting some of this into use, and then some more of it once I get my straight lines down. Baby steps.
It's all in the elbow.
Baby steps.
I think.
Just like I tell my daughter, if you want to get good at drawing, you got to keep practicing.
Yeah, buy Ed Emberley's Draw World and use it.
I will. I'm excited. Fun. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I'll let you know how it goes.
I'll talk to you soon, man.
All right. Take care. Bye.